begin in the Middle East, where thousands of displaced Palestinians are returning to northern Gaza. I want to take you to the live pictures from Gaza, where you can see there are long lines of people streaming along that coast road, many carrying their possessions on their backs. Residents were allowed to start returning on foot 4 hours ago. Many are using Rashid Street, the sea road. Then 2 hours later, vehicles were allowed to start moving into the north, but they will all have to be inspected at checkpoints. Now, over the weekend, thousands of Palestinians who had hoped to be allowed back home had gathered at the military barrier which had been blocking the route. The Israeli authorities had made the return of the tens of thousands of Palestinians to the north conditional on the release of an Israeli civilian hostage. Arbel Yehud, she wasn't freed on Saturday when 4 women soldiers were. Hamas says it will now release her and 2 other hostages on Thursday, followed by 3 more on Saturday. In other developments, Egypt has rejected any attempt to relocate Palestinians from Gaza after US President Donald Trump said he'd like to see more than 1 million of Gaza's residents taken in by other Arab nations. He told reporters that the Strip was, and I quote, literally a demolition site, and suggested it be cleaned out. Well, let's go live to our correspondent John Donnison, who joins me from Jerusalem. John, we are seeing these extraordinary live pictures of those thousands of people heading back to the north, I suppose, to see what is left of their homes.
Yeah, and we're not talking about thousands of people, we're talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people on the move. It's estimated there are some more than 500,000 Palestinians in southern Gaza who have been displaced from the north and are going to try and go home. But you're right to suggest that many of them won't have a home to go to. The United Nations says some 60% of all buildings in the Gaza Strip have been destroyed or damaged. Nevertheless, people want to get back to the rubble of their homes and make some attempt to rebuild.
John, yeah, I'm seeing also on one of the feeds of pictures queues of cars waiting. Just explain the difference between those who are allowed on foot and if they do have a vehicle.
Yeah, so from 7 o'clock local time this morning, Palestinians were allowed to start moving on foot. So they all started going up the coastal road, which runs all the way along the coast through Gaza. And it's quite a long walk, actually. I mean, certainly if they're going to the very far north of Gaza, you're going to be talking more than 10 kilometres. They were going on foot, carrying whatever they could, the sick, the young. 2 hours later, they opened the main Salah al-Din road, which goes right up the middle of the Gaza Strip. That was open to cars, trucks, any sort of vehicle, but all those vehicles have to be inspected by the Israeli military. And my experience of Israeli checkpoints, I mean, that could be a very, very long wait for people.
And John, just explain why there was the hold-up, because we had expected this to happen at the weekend.
Yes, under the original ceasefire plan, it was meant to happen at the weekend, but then we had some wrangling over which hostages should have been released on Saturday. So the Israelis had said that they wanted a civilian hostage, a woman who's now 29, she was 28 when she was captured, Arbel Yehud, and she has now been put on the list of those who are going to be freed later in the week, because at the weekend we only had those 4 Israeli soldiers coming out. So she's going to come out on Thursday now with 2 other Israeli hostages, and then on Saturday 3 further hostages will be released in exchange for scores of Palestinian prisoners.
And on the ceasefire deal, we are in phase 1. How many people in this first phase are we expecting to be released? And indeed, how many of those Palestinian prisoners that are held in Israeli jails will be released in return?
Well, on the Israeli side, it's 33 Israeli hostages in total in the first 6-week phase. 7 have already come out so far, so that's 26 more over the next 5 weeks. On the Palestinian side, we've had about 300 prisoners released from Israeli jails so far, and there's a further 1,600 Palestinian prisoners to come in the next 5 weeks. And I expect every weekend there's going to be wrangling over the names on the list, who should come out, whether it's hostages who are alive or dead, the seniority, the seriousness of some of the offences those Palestinian prisoners have been convicted for. So it is going to be a complex process. The negotiations will go on, and we've still got to start the negotiations for the second phase of the ceasefire arrangement, and that is the moment when we should, if things go to plan, get an end to the war. It's not over yet. We've got to pause. The second phase of the negotiations could be much more complex.
And I'm interested, John, I mentioned President Trump's comments over the weekend. How have those gone down, both in Israel and with the Palestinians and Arab nations that he mentioned?
Well, amongst Palestinians, they've gone down like a lead balloon. I mean, that is a complete non-starter for them. The words he used, that Gaza should be cleaned out, for many Palestinians, well, that will just sound like ethnic cleansing. Mr. Trump suggested that Palestinians should emigrate on a temporary or long-term basis to Egypt and Jordan. Egypt have said, no, we're not having that. Jordan has said the same. So for the Arab world, I mean, that is a non-starter. Gaza, for them, is these people's homes. So they're not going to leave. On the other side, it's been welcomed by some of the far-right Israeli ministers and settlers who have been saying for months now that they should encourage emigration from Gaza in order that Jewish settlers could move back into Gaza and set up settlements there. So, you know, Donald Trump has a long history of speaking off the cuff, floating ideas that maybe don't come to fruition, but certainly a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger, really, from Palestinians here in the Holy Land.
John Donaldson in Jerusalem, thank you. I want to bring in now our Gaza correspondent, Rushdie Abelouf, who you will remember at the start of the conflict was reporting live from Gaza, where he lived. He's currently in Cairo. And Rushdie, I just wanted to start on a personal note from you as to how you feel seeing these pictures that we've been showing live of those hundreds of thousands of Palestinians making their way back into the north.
Well, mixed feeling, very emotional day for me and my family. Very relieved that my father and my rest of the family will be starting their journey back to Gaza City. Well, most of their homes were destroyed, but it's a big day for all Palestinians. We are talking about more than 1 million people are in the move. Not sure if all of them will be managed to cross today, because, you know, it's a long walk and it is going to take a very long time to walk this road. It's a dusty road, semi-destroyed road. They made some progress in paving out some of the rebels yesterday, the Qataris and the Egyptians and the Americans who are in the ground to facilitate the return back for the people. They started walking on a coastal road early in the morning, but in the last hour they started to allow cars to cross into northern Gaza. The process is that they allow 20 cars each time to a certain area, and they are checked by scanner first and by hands. So there is a team inspecting the car, checking, make sure that no, military equipment inside the car. So every 40 minutes, they process 40 cars, and they believe that they could process as much as 4,000 cars every day back into Gaza. But people are walking freely without any obstacles, without any Israeli troops in the place, because the army has withdrawn its forces from the coastal road early in the morning, allowing people to return back. We are in Cairo with about 100,000 people who were first forced to displace from their homes and then left to Cairo or other country for the safety of their people. All of them are waiting for any time Egypt would open the Rafah crossing and allow people back into Gaza.
You said it's an emotional moment for you and, of course, will be for the Palestinians who are moving today, because, of course, we have to remember that they will have been moved a number of times since the conflict began.
Yes, and they are facing the reality now. Well, the joy in the very early morning is mixed and overshadowed with the reality that they now need 150,000 tent as an urgent matter. The Hamas-run local authority just issued a statement saying that they need 150,000 tent. And this can all reflect how much destruction are in Gaza City. The images and videos we are getting from there is completely, unfortunate for the people who are returning back. I was following two families who have been waiting for 2 days in that checkpoint. One of them is a barber, and he made it to Gaza City. He just sent me a text message saying that the shop, his salon, was looted first and then bombed, and his house was completely burned. And so he was waiting for long hours in the queue. And then when he gets to his place, he couldn't find his house and his income, his source of income, his job. So very sad for him. He was very happy when I was talking to him in the last couple of days that finally he will be back to his neighborhood. But very quickly he realized that the fact in the ground is completely different.
Rushdie, thank you for bringing us your views. That's our Gaza correspondent, Rushdie Arbel Yehud, who, as I said, is currently in Cairo.